Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to start our journey today with our presentation on world geography. This is the cover slide, so I just want to briefly introduce what we'll be exploring together. We'll look at the diverse landscapes, cultures, and interesting facts from around the globe. I promise it'll be engaging and insightful. So let's get started. Let's take a closer look at the interconnectedness of people and the environment, which is the focus of this slide. Throughout this presentation, we've explored various themes that influence how humans interact with their world. Starting with economic development, we see it repeatedly mentioned because it's a key factor shaping societies and their environments. Economic systems, including different types of government, play a crucial role in how resources are managed and how policies impact the environment. World trade is another vital point, as it connects regions and influences environmental balances through the movement of goods and resources. Culture hearths, or centers of cultural development, also affect environmental practices and land use. Population density and reasons why population rates vary help us understand the pressures on resources and land. Climate zones and vegetation are significant because they define the natural environment and impact economic activities, social groups, and cultural changes. We also consider Earth's physical features, landforms, waterways, and climate, since they set the stage for human settlement and development. The industrial and information revolutions transformed societies, leading to rapid economic growth, but also new environmental challenges. Understanding these elements helps us see the bigger picture of how humans adapt and influence their environment, shaping the world we live in today. The Earth is tilted on its axis by about 23.5 degrees, and this tilt is really important because it causes the seasons to change as Earth revolves around the sun. When Earth moves around the sun, sunlight hits different parts of the planet directly or indirectly. For example, when the sun's rays shine directly on a certain area, that's summer there. Conversely, when the rays are more indirect, it's winter. Now, some basic facts to keep in mind. Earth is the third planet from the sun in our solar system. It has a layer of air called the atmosphere surrounding it, which acts like a shield to protect us from harm. Earth also rotates on its axis, completing a full spin every 24 hours, which is why we experience day and night. And then there's Earth's orbit around the sun, which takes about 365.25 days to complete. That extra quarter of a day is why we have a leap year every 4 years to keep our calendar aligned with the seasons. Understanding these key points helps us see how Earth's position and movements in space influence the changing seasons and our climate here on the surface. Today, let's explore the theory of plate movement, which is also known as continental drift. Essentially, the Earth's outer shell is made up of large pieces called tectonic plates that are constantly moving. When these plates meet, it can cause earthquakes, which are quite powerful and often destructive. If two plates push together over time, they can form mountain ranges. On the other hand, when two plates slide past each other, it creates fault lines. These are fractures in the Earth's crust where seismic activity often occurs. Now, what drives these movements? Beneath the Earth's surface, there's a layer of liquid rock called magma that acts like a conveyor belt, moving the plates in different directions. This movement is explained by the theory of plate tectonics, which helps us understand the structure of our planet. The Earth is always changing, continually being reshaped by these forces, making it a dynamic, ever-evolving planet. This constant change is fundamental to understanding the Earth's geology and the forces that shape our world. Let's explore some of the key landforms and waterways that shape our landscape. First, we have canyons, which are deep, narrow valleys that cut through plateaus, often formed by rivers over a long period. They create dramatic, steep-sided valleys that are quite striking to see. Next, valleys are the low areas found between mountains and hills. They're typically where rivers flow and where many towns and farms are located, thanks to the gentler terrain. Then there are plateaus, which are areas of higher elevation. Some plateaus have steep cliffs on the edges, giving them a dramatic appearance, while others are flat, expansive lands surrounded by mountains. Moving on to plains, these are low-lying, flat, or gently rolling areas. They're often ideal for agriculture because of their level terrain and fertile soil. So what really makes these landforms different from each other? Elevation, or how high they are above sea level, is a big factor. Mountains are very tall, hills are smaller, and plateaus sit at a higher elevation but with different features. Valleys and canyons tend to be lower and carved out by water, while plains are the lowest, broad, flat areas. In summary, these landforms, mountains, hills, plateaus, plains, valleys, and canyons, each have unique features shaped by elevation and water activity. They all contribute to the diverse landscape we see around us. Let's take a closer look at some specific landforms. A peninsula, for example, is a piece of land that is surrounded by water on 3 sides. It often juts out into the water, creating a distinct shape. Then we have the isthmus, which is a narrow strip of land that connects 2 larger landmasses. Think of it as a natural bridge between bigger areas. These landforms are interesting because they are defined by their relationship with water or larger land areas. Understanding these helps us see how different landforms are shaped by their surroundings and how they influence human activity and ecosystems. This connects to the overall idea that landforms are not just about the shape of the land itself, but also about how they interact with water and larger regions around them. Now let's take a closer look at some important features of bodies of water. First, we have the mouth of a river, which is the point where the river flows into a larger body of water. Often, this area forms what we call a delta, where the river deposits sediment, creating a rich and fertile land. Next, there's a wider passage of land known as a channel. This is typically a navigable route for ships and boats, connecting larger bodies of water. Finally, we have the strait, which is a narrow body of water that lies between 2 pieces of land. Straits are often critical for maritime navigation because they serve as natural passages connecting larger bodies of water. Understanding these features helps us better grasp how water moves and shapes the geography around us, which ties into the overall theme of how natural landforms and waterways influence our environment and daily lives. Let's talk about one of the most fascinating landforms in the ocean, the Mariana Trench. This is actually the deepest part of the ocean, located in the Pacific Ocean, and it reaches over 35,000 feet below the surface. To give you a sense of scale, that's longer than the height of Mount Everest. Beneath the ocean's surface, you'll find tall mountains and deep valleys. These deep valleys are called trenches, and they are some of the most extreme features on Earth. They're formed by tectonic movements, where one plate is diving beneath another, creating these incredible geological formations. Now let's look at the continental shelf. This is the gently sloping area that extends off the coast of each continent. Imagine it as an underwater plateau. It's relatively shallow and flat compared to the deep ocean. But it doesn't stay flat forever. It suddenly drops off steeply into the deep ocean, leading into those vast, mysterious depths we've just discussed. Understanding these landforms helps us appreciate the complex and dynamic nature of our oceans. They are not just vast bodies of water, but are filled with incredible structures that tell the story of Earth's geological activity. The sun is the driving force behind the water cycle, powering the movement of water around our planet. Even though the total amount of water on Earth stays the same, it's always in motion through processes like evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. This continuous cycle keeps water circulating in different forms and locations. When we look at bodies of water, we see smaller ones like bays, seas, and gulfs. There are about 66 of these named. But the largest bodies are the oceans, which hold about 97% of all the water on Earth. It's important to note that most of this ocean water isn't drinkable, because only about 3% of all water on Earth is fresh and accessible for us to use. Did you know that about 70% of Earth's surface is covered with water? This vast amount of water plays a crucial role in supporting life, shaping our climate, and fueling the water cycle that we've been discussing. So, understanding these proportions helps us appreciate just how vital water is to our planet's health and our daily lives. Let's talk about how elevation influences climate. When you're at higher altitudes, the air tends to be thinner and drier, which means it holds less heat. That's why mountain regions are often cooler and drier compared to sea-level areas. Next, latitude plays a big role in shaping climate. Whether you're north or south of the equator, your position affects the type of climate you experience. Generally, the closer you are to the poles, the cooler your climate tends to be. The sun's rays also change intensity depending on your location. When you're farther from the equator, say, further south or north, the sun's rays aren't as direct. This means less solar energy reaches the surface, which impacts temperatures and climate patterns. Now, let's connect this to the Earth-Sun relationship. The tropics, which are between about 23.5 degrees north and south of the equator, receive the most direct sunlight year-round. That's why these regions tend to be warmer and more consistent in their climate. So, what causes climates to vary across different areas? It's not just the sun and latitude. Winds, ocean currents, landforms, and even human activity all influence local and regional climates. Finally, it's important to distinguish between climate and weather. Climate refers to the usual, predictable patterns over long periods, think decades or centuries, while weather is about the short-term, day-to-day changes we experience. Understanding this helps us see how different factors combine to shape the world's diverse climates. Let's talk about monsoons first. These are wind patterns that blow over South Asia, bringing dry conditions in the winter and heavy rains during the summer months. It's a powerful example of how seasonal winds can shape a region's climate. Now, have you ever wondered why these winds change direction? Well, the Earth's rotation plays a big role here. Because the Earth spins, it causes winds to curve, a phenomenon known as the Coriolis effect. In the northern hemisphere, winds tend to blow clockwise, while in the southern hemisphere, they blow counterclockwise. This curving of wind paths influences weather patterns worldwide. Next, consider how warm and cold air move across the planet. Warm air near the equator heads toward the poles, and cold air from the poles moves toward the equator. Remember, air always moves from high-pressure areas to low-pressure areas, which drives much of our weather. And then there's the sun's uneven heating of Earth's surface. Some areas get more direct sunlight, warming the surface more intensely, while others stay cooler. This uneven heating causes air to move in prevailing patterns, helping to distribute the sun's heat around the globe. All these factors, monsoon winds, Earth's rotation, temperature-driven air movements, are interconnected. They shape our climate and weather patterns, illustrating just how dynamic and complex Earth's atmospheric system truly is. Now, let's talk about some of the key climate phenomena that influence weather patterns around the world. First, we have La Niña, which occurs when water in the Pacific cools down. This cooling has a significant effect on the western Pacific region, impacting weather and ocean conditions there. On the other hand, El Niño happens when the Pacific Ocean warms up. This warming causes more water to evaporate, leading to increased cloud formation. As a result, we see changes in wind and rain patterns, especially in the eastern Pacific. Both El Niño and La Niña are interconnected, representing a complex combination of temperature shifts, wind changes, and water movements in the Pacific off the coast of South America. These interactions can significantly influence global weather patterns. Now, shifting gears to hurricanes. These are extremely powerful tropical storms that originate from seasonal winds blowing off the coast of Africa. These storms can travel across the Atlantic and into the Western Hemisphere, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and severe weather impacts. Finally, it's important to see how all these elements, wind, water temperature, and atmospheric conditions, are interconnected, shaping our climate and weather patterns in a dynamic and often unpredictable way. The wind blows across the warm water, and this plays a crucial role in moderating the climate of Western Europe. You see, the Gulf Stream begins in the Gulf of Mexico and then moves across the Atlantic toward Europe. This ocean current has a significant impact on the climate of those regions. Think of it like this. Cold water from the poles travels towards warmer areas, and warm water from near the equator flows toward cooler regions. These movements of water, known as ocean currents, are like streams carried across the globe. So the Gulf Stream essentially transfers warm water from the tropics to the northwestern parts of Europe, helping to keep the climate milder than you might expect given its latitude. This connection between wind, water, and climate really highlights how interconnected our planet's systems are and how they work together to shape regional climates. Mountains play a significant role in shaping climate by affecting rainfall and temperature patterns. When moist, warm air encounters a mountain range, it rises and cools down because cooler air can't hold as much moisture as warm air. This process causes the moisture to condense and fall as rain on the windward side of the mountains. So, essentially, the windward side tends to be lush and wetter. As the air continues over the mountain and descends on the leeward side, it warms up again and becomes drier, creating what we call the rain shadow effect. This is why the leeward side is often much drier and sometimes desert-like. Now, land itself influences local climate too. It can generate specific local winds and weather patterns based on its features. And when we talk about coasts, they're generally moderated by nearby oceans. The large water bodies help keep the weather more stable and less prone to extreme changes, unlike inland areas which can experience more temperature swings. So, in summary, landforms like mountains and coastlines are key factors that create diverse climates across regions. They help us understand why some areas are lush and rainy, while others are dry and arid. Let's talk about the impact of clearing rainforests. When forests are burned, they release gases into the air, which can contribute to climate change. Plus, trees play a crucial role in holding moisture, so when they're gone, there's less water evaporating into the atmosphere, leading to reduced rainfall. This creates a sort of cycle that can worsen droughts and impact ecosystems. Now, moving to the greenhouse effect. Burning fossil fuels releases gases like carbon dioxide that trap heat in our atmosphere. This is often called the greenhouse effect, and while it's a bit controversial, the core idea is that these gases prevent heat from escaping back into space, leading to global warming. Related to that is the urban heat island effect. Cities tend to be warmer than surrounding areas because they absorb more of the sun's rays and cool down more slowly. This not only affects local climates, but also makes urban areas more vulnerable to heat stress and energy demands. So overall, these interconnected processes, deforestation, greenhouse gases, and urban heat, highlight how human activities are significantly impacting our climate. It's a reminder of why sustainable practices are so vital for our future. Let's take a closer look at some of the key climate zones and their vegetation. First, the tropical savanna. This region experiences distinct wet and dry seasons, which influence the landscape significantly. You'll notice it has broad grasslands known as savannas, which support a variety of wildlife and are vital for agriculture in many areas. Moving on, we have the tropical rainforest. This climate receives about 100 inches of rain annually, creating incredibly lush vegetation and dense, thick forests. These forests are some of the most biodiverse places on Earth. Finally, it's important to understand that tropical climates are generally found within 23.5 degrees north and south of the equator. These areas tend to have warm weather year-round, which contributes to the rich, vibrant ecosystems we see there. All these climate zones and their vegetation are interconnected and play a crucial role in shaping Earth's diverse environments. Let's take a closer look at some of the key climate zones and their vegetation. First, the Mediterranean climate. This region is characterized by mild, rainy winters and hot, dry summers. The vegetation here mainly consists of shrubs and short trees that are well adapted to these conditions. Think of the landscapes around the Mediterranean Sea, olive trees, lavender, and hardy bushes that thrive in this climate. Next, we have the marine West Coast climate. Here, winds coming from the ocean play a big role in shaping the weather. Winters tend to be rainy and mild, creating a relatively moderate environment year-round. Because of these conditions, this region supports a wide variety of vegetation, everything from lush forests to various types of grasses, depending on the specific location. Finally, let's talk about the mid-latitude climates. These are found roughly between 23 and 60 degrees north and south of the equator. Interestingly, most of the world's population lives within this zone. It's also the most diverse in terms of climate and vegetation because of the mixing of different air masses. This diversity leads to a wide range of plant life, from temperate forests to grasslands, making it a truly dynamic and vital part of our planet. Understanding these climate zones helps us see how climate influences the types of plants that can grow, which in turn affects the ecosystems and human activities in each region. Today, let's take a closer look at the different climate zones and their associated vegetation. First, we have the humid subtropical climate. This zone experiences rain all year round, which supports lush, green growth. Summers here tend to be hot and humid, making it feel quite warm and moist. Winters, on the other hand, are short and mild, so the climate remains relatively comfortable throughout the year. Moving on to the humid continental climate, which has a very different pattern. Winters are long, cold, and snowy, often lasting for several months. Summers are short but can be quite hot. The vegetation in this zone mainly consists of vast grasslands because the cold winters limit the growth of trees and other dense vegetation. Connecting these points to our overall theme, understanding these climate zones helps explain why different regions support such diverse ecosystems. The climate directly influences the types of plants that thrive, shaping the landscape we see across different areas. Let's take a closer look at the tundra climate. It features vast treeless plains that are both harsh and dry. One of the key characteristics is the permanently frozen lower layers of soil, known as permafrost. During the summer, this soil can become marshy, but overall, the environment supports very few trees. Instead, you'll find grasses and shrubs adapted to these tough conditions. Moving on to the subarctic climate, this region is marked by a low population density. The landscape is dominated by enormous evergreen forests called taiga, which are vital for the local ecosystem and climate regulation. Finally, at high latitudes, from about 60 degrees north or south all the way to the poles, the climate is generally cold year-round. These areas have extreme conditions that influence the types of vegetation that can survive there. Understanding these climate zones helps us see how environment shapes the vegetation and, ultimately, the way humans and wildlife adapt to these regions. Now let's take a closer look at some of the major climate zones and their vegetation. First, we have the steppe climate. This zone features partially dry grasslands where bushes and short grasses are the dominant vegetation. It's a semi-arid region, so while it gets some rainfall, it's not enough to support lush forests. Next is the desert climate, which receives less than 10 inches of rain per year. In these areas, scattered scrub plants are typical, adapted to survive with minimal water. Moving on to dry climates in general, these regions experience very little rainfall, and they tend to have hot days and cool nights. Interestingly, they can also have cold winters, and you'll find these conditions at any latitude. This variability makes these climates quite diverse. Finally, we have the ice cap climate, which is extremely cold. The only vegetation that can survive here are lichens and mosses, which are specially adapted to withstand the harsh, icy conditions. Overall, these climate zones show us how different environmental conditions influence the types of vegetation we find in various parts of the world. They help us understand the connection between climate and the natural landscape. Today, I want to talk about the concept of timberline, which is the elevation point where trees no longer grow. This is a crucial idea because it marks the boundary between forested areas and the alpine zone. Interestingly, timberline can be found in all climate zones, not just specific ones, highlighting how elevation impacts vegetation across different environments. Now, moving on to the highland climate, which is characterized by cooler temperatures and often more variable weather due to higher elevations. These areas tend to have unique ecological conditions that influence the types of plants and animals that can survive there. Understanding these climate zones and features like timberline helps us see how the environment shapes the distribution of life on Earth. It's a key part of our overall exploration of how climate influences landscape and ecosystems everywhere. Let's talk about environmental balance. As we've seen with examples like acid rain, pollutants can combine with precipitation and cause significant damage, destroying forests and buildings. This highlights how human activities can directly affect our atmosphere. Now, the atmosphere is just one part of the Earth's physical systems, which include the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. Humans can have a major impact on all of these systems. For example, climate changes, resource availability, and water supply influence where people choose to settle. Historically and today, humans have settled on all kinds of landforms, adapting to and sometimes altering the environment to meet their needs. Understanding this balance is crucial because it shows how interconnected our actions are with the health of the planet, and it ties back to the overall theme of how humans influence Earth's systems. So, how can humans protect topsoil? Well, one major factor is deforestation, which means cutting down trees. This is another way topsoil can be lost because trees help anchor the soil and prevent erosion. Topsoil is a vital part of our environment because it supports plant growth and sustains ecosystems. But if we don't manage it properly, it can be eroded and degraded very quickly, making it harder for plants to grow and disrupting the balance of our land. Now, it's also important to understand the role of the lithosphere, which is essentially Earth's hard outer shell. Think of it as the land areas we walk on. Protecting this outer layer is crucial for maintaining the overall environmental balance. When we look at these issues together, it's clear that human activities like deforestation threaten this delicate balance, but with mindful management, we can help preserve our topsoil and ensure a healthy, sustainable planet. Let's talk about the environmental balance and some of the challenges we face. Chemicals, pesticides, and industrial processes often degrade and pollute our water supplies, which is a serious concern for ecosystems and human health alike. When it comes to irrigation, it's important to note that much of the water used for crops is wasted because a lot of it simply evaporates before it can be absorbed by the plants. This highlights the need for more efficient water management practices. In fact, conservation is one of the most effective techniques we have to protect our water resources. Remember, the hydrosphere, the Earth's water system, is a limited resource, so maintaining its balance is crucial. Overall, understanding these points helps us see how vital it is to manage our water wisely to ensure environmental stability and sustainability. Let's talk about the biosphere and how human activity impacts it. As the human population grows, we tend to encroach more and more on natural ecosystems. This means we're expanding cities, agriculture, and industry into areas that were once untouched. Unfortunately, this encroachment often leads to a reduction in biodiversity, meaning fewer species can survive in those habitats. This is a key point because maintaining biodiversity is essential for a healthy, balanced environment. When species are lost, it can disrupt entire ecosystems and affect the services they provide us, like clean air, water, and fertile soil. This slide highlights the importance of environmental balance. Our growth and development need to be managed carefully to prevent further harm to ecosystems. It's about finding ways to meet our needs without compromising the health of the planet for future generations. Keeping this balance is crucial for sustainability and the overall health of the biosphere. Let's talk about natural increase, which is essentially the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. When the birth rate is higher than the death rate, the population starts to grow. You'll notice that in recent times, the birth rate has been growing faster than the death rate, leading to a significant increase in global population. Now, if we look back before the Industrial Revolution, the world's population grew very slowly. It was a much more stable and gradual process. At that point, the total number of people on Earth was about 6.2 billion. This slide highlights how population growth has evolved over time. setting the stage for understanding the factors that have driven this rapid increase in recent centuries. It's a key part of our overall theme because it shows how technological and social changes have impacted population dynamics. On this slide, we're exploring why population rates vary so much around the world. In developing regions like Latin America, Africa, and Asia, we see high birth rates. This is often due to cultural attitudes that value large families and the importance of having many children. In contrast, in many industrialized countries, we observe low birth rates, sometimes even below replacement level. This can lead to some countries reaching zero population growth, which raises concerns about aging populations and workforce sustainability. A key reason for these differences is improvements in healthcare, advanced technology, and better nutrition, all of which reduce death rates. So, while death rates decline everywhere, the birth rate trends differ depending on cultural, economic, and technological factors. Understanding these variations helps us see the complex interplay between society and demographic changes across the globe. Can technology keep up? Food supply, use resources quickly. As our population continues to grow, one of the biggest challenges we face is ensuring we have enough food to meet everyone's needs. Technology plays a crucial role here, but it's a constant race. Can it keep pace with the rapid consumption of resources? We're using resources at an unprecedented rate, which puts a lot of pressure on our agricultural systems and supply chains. This raises important questions about sustainability and whether innovations can effectively address these increasing demands. It's a complex issue that ties directly into the overall challenge of feeding a growing world population while maintaining our environment. Let's talk about some of the challenges that come with immigration, specifically the import of laborers. When large groups of workers move into a country, it can sometimes cause tension between different groups. This is because of competition for jobs, resources, and social differences, which can lead to conflicts or misunderstandings. At the same time, having fewer workers can make it difficult to keep an economy running smoothly. When the workforce shrinks, industries may struggle to meet demand, and economic growth can slow down. This is especially relevant as we look at late 1900s Europe, where many countries started facing these issues. During this period, a significant trend emerged. The death rate was exceeding the birth rate. This means that more people were passing away than being born, leading to a declining population. We call this phenomenon negative population growth, and it has serious implications for the future of these societies. In summary, these demographic shifts, fewer workers, population decline, pose complex challenges for a nation's economy and social fabric. It highlights the importance of understanding how population dynamics influence broader societal trends and policy decisions. Let's take a closer look at how human populations are distributed across the globe. Europe and North America have the highest proportions of people living in urban areas, which reflects a trend toward city living in these regions. In contrast, Asia is home to about 60% of the world's population, making it the most populous continent. Interestingly, most people tend to settle near water sources, fertile soil, and areas with favorable climates that support sustainable living. It's important to note that less than 1/3 of the planet's surface is actually inhabited. Human settlement is quite uneven, with some regions densely populated and others sparsely inhabited. This uneven distribution highlights how geography and environment play crucial roles in where people choose to live, shaping the overall pattern of human settlement across the world. So, why is this method not always accurate? Well, simply looking at how many people live in a square mile or kilometer doesn't tell the whole story. It gives us a general idea of how crowded a country is, but it can be misleading. For example, some countries have densely populated cities but large areas of sparsely inhabited land. So a high population density might reflect urban areas rather than the entire country. It's important to understand that this measure is just one way to assess how crowded a place is, and we need to consider other factors to get a complete picture. This ties into our overall theme of understanding how geography impacts daily life and development around the world. So, as we look at the causes of migration, we see that war, environmental disasters, and famine are major factors that force people to move. These challenging conditions often make it impossible for individuals and families to stay in their original homes. At the same time, many people are moving toward urban areas, not just because they have to, but because they see opportunities, like jobs, education, and better services. These are what we call push and pull factors. Push factors are the reasons that push people away from their current location, like conflict or scarcity. Pull factors are the attractions of new places, like economic opportunities or safety. Migration is essentially this movement from one place to another, whether it's from rural to urban areas or across countries. Understanding these dynamics helps us see how populations shift over time and how different factors influence where people choose to live. It's a key part of understanding overall population trends and their impacts. Let's take a closer look at the different subgroups that make up a culture. These include aspects like economics, government, religion, language, and other shared practices. Each of these elements plays a vital role in shaping the way of life for a group of people. For example, the economy influences how people earn and spend money, while government structures affect how societies are organized and governed. Religion provides spiritual guidance and shared beliefs, and language is the primary way people communicate and pass down their traditions. When we talk about culture, we're really referring to this whole way of life that a community shares. Understanding these subgroups helps us see the diversity and complexity of global cultures, which is what this entire presentation is about. World's languages are divided into different language groups, which share similar roots. These groups help us understand how languages are connected and how they evolved from common ancestors. Recognizing these connections can really give us insight into how cultures are intertwined. Language plays a vital role in unifying culture, as it's a key part of our identity and heritage. It allows us to communicate information clearly, share ideas, and pass on traditions and values from generation to generation. So, language isn't just about words. It's about preserving our history and fostering understanding among diverse communities. Religious symbols and stories have a profound impact on literature and the arts, shaping many of the works we appreciate today. They serve as powerful tools for expressing spiritual ideas and moral values. These symbols and stories don't just stay within religious contexts. They influence our daily lives, guiding morals, shaping values, and inspiring holidays that bring communities together. They play a unifying role, helping people find a shared sense of identity and belonging. At the same time, it's important to recognize that these symbols and stories vary greatly around the world, reflecting different cultures, histories, and beliefs. This diversity enriches our global cultural landscape and reminds us of the varied ways humans seek meaning and connection. So, as we explore different religions, remember how deeply these elements influence not just individual faiths, but also the broader social fabric. Vamos explorar las religions del mundo, un aspecto fundamental para entender como las diferentes culturas buscan respuestas a las grandes preguntas de la vida. Cada religión tiene sus propias creencias, prácticas y tradiciones que reflejan la historia y los valores de sus comunidades. Desde el cristianismo, el islam, el hinduismo y el budismo, hasta muchas otras religiones menos conocidas, todas ofrecen perspectivas únicas sobre la existencia, la moral y el propósito. Conocer estas religiones nos ayuda a comprender mejor la diversidad humana y cómo estas creencias influyen en la cultura, la política y las relaciones sociales en todo el mundo. Al final, reconocer las similitudes y diferencias entre ellas nos acerca a una visión más comprensiva y respetuosa del mundo en que vivimos. Some cultures include diverse ethnic groups that share common language, history, and traditions. Social class, on the other hand, is about the rank or position a person holds based on factors like wealth, ancestry, education, and other criteria. It's important to understand that social class can influence many aspects of life, including opportunities and interactions. Family is considered the most vital part of all cultures. However, the definition and makeup of a family can vary widely from one culture to another. For some, it might be a traditional nuclear family, while for others, it includes extended relatives or chosen family members. Ultimately, these cultural elements, ethnic groups, social class, and family, allow different cultures to work together effectively to meet basic needs and build strong communities. Recognizing and respecting these differences is key to understanding how societies function and thrive. So, when we look at the types of authority, we see a few main categories. We have authority held by a single leader, like a monarch or a dictator. Then there are small groups of leaders, such as a ruling council or a small committee. And finally, there are representative leaders, like elected officials who act on behalf of the people. These different types of authority are often organized by levels of power: national, state, and local. Each level plays a vital role in maintaining order and stability within a society. All these forms of government share some common goals. They work to maintain order, protect citizens from outside threats, and provide essential services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. It's also important to recognize that government reflects the culture of a society. The values, traditions, and social norms influence how a government is structured and how it operates. So, whether it's a single leader or a group of representatives, the core purpose remains the same: to serve the people and uphold the society's order and values. Now, let's explore how different cultures produce, obtain, use, and sell goods and services. This process is deeply connected to their resources and how they manage them. Each culture has its own unique way of utilizing resources, which shapes their economic activities. For example, some societies might rely heavily on agriculture, while others focus on manufacturing or trade. By understanding these patterns, we gain insight into the broader economic systems and how they reflect cultural values and priorities. This slide highlights that economic activity isn't just about money. It's about how people organize their work and resources to meet their needs and wants. Recognizing these differences helps us see the rich diversity in how cultures sustain themselves and interact within the global economy. On this slide, we see how different regions share common elements like history, art forms, and religion, which help define their unique identities. We also look at other aspects such as economic systems, types of government, social groups, and languages. These shared traits allow us to understand how cultures develop and influence each other over time. By grouping areas into cultural regions, we can see how certain characteristics are consistent within a specific area, helping us better understand the diversity and connections across the world. This concept is essential to our overall theme of exploring how human societies are shaped by their environments and histories. Let's talk about how new knowledge and skills spread from one culture to another, which is known as cultural diffusion. This process happens in several ways. Outside influences like trade, the movement of people, and war all play a significant role in this exchange. When traders or travelers move between regions, they carry ideas, technologies, and customs with them. Similarly, wars can lead to the conquest and integration of different cultures, facilitating the sharing of knowledge. Inside the cultures themselves, this diffusion influences lifestyles, ideas, and inventions. For example, a new tool or belief from one society can be adopted and adapted by another, leading to cultural change. So, what creates this cultural change? It's a combination of external factors, like interactions with other groups, and internal developments within a society. These processes continually shape and transform cultures over time, making history a dynamic story of interconnectedness and adaptation. Around 3500 BC, we see the rise of organized, city-based societies. These civilizations had established governments, engaged in trade, and made significant advances in art and science. This marks a major milestone in human history, showing how societies became more complex and structured. Before that, there was a crucial shift from simply gathering food to producing it ourselves. This is known as the agricultural revolution. It transformed how humans lived, allowing for more stable food supplies and larger populations. Going even further back, about 10,000 years ago, people first settled in river valleys. These areas provided ideal conditions for farming and water supply, leading to the development of permanent settlements. All these changes highlight how humans adapted and evolved, laying the foundation for the complex societies and civilizations we see today. It's a fascinating journey of innovation and growth that connects directly to the broader theme of human progress. Factors that allowed people to grow surplus food all emerged in areas with mild climates and fertile land. These regions were typically located near major rivers or other sources of water, which made farming easier and more productive. Because of these favorable conditions, the first civilizations, often called cultural hearths, developed in these areas. These hearths are essentially the birthplaces of early culture and society, where agriculture and other advancements first took hold. Recognizing these key factors helps us understand how environment shaped the development of the earliest societies and their ability to sustain larger populations. So, one of the most important developments in early civilizations was the creation of writing systems. These systems allowed people to record and transmit information across generations, which was crucial for managing complex societies. With writing, governments could coordinate large-scale building projects, organize harvests, and even plan and defend against military threats. This ability to communicate efficiently helped stabilize and expand these civilizations. As societies grew wealthier and more organized, they formed increasingly complex governments and social structures. Surplus food played a key role here. When communities produced more than they needed for immediate consumption, it freed up resources to develop other economic activities like trade, crafts, and specialization. This surplus, along with the development of writing, led to more specialized roles within society. People could focus on specific crafts or trades, which in turn fueled economic growth and cultural development. All of these innovations and changes connect to the bigger picture of how civilizations advanced, by creating tools and systems to support larger, more organized communities. This process of specialization and development laid the foundation for the complex societies we see later in history. As we look at this slide, we're focusing on how cultural contacts lead to the blending of traditions, practices, and beliefs across different cultures. When different groups come into contact, whether through trade, migration, or other interactions, their customs often influence one another, creating new cultural blends. One key point here is permanent migration, which involves people moving to new regions and settling there for good. These migrations often bring about lasting cultural exchanges. Favorable conditions like good climate, economic opportunities, and the chance for greater freedom are powerful motivators that attract people from one region to another. These factors make migration more likely and contribute to cultural mixing. Another important aspect is contact through trade and travel. Historically, trade routes facilitated not just the exchange of goods, but also ideas, beliefs, and practices, really vital for cultural evolution. We also need to acknowledge forced migration, such as the transatlantic slave trade, which forcibly moved large populations and significantly impacted cultures worldwide. All these causes, migration, trade, and even forced movements, are examples of how civilizations interact and influence each other, leading to the rich, diverse cultural landscapes we see today. This interconnectedness is a fundamental theme of our overall presentation, showing how cultures are constantly shaping and reshaping themselves through contact. At the end of the 1900s, we saw the information and technology revolution really transforming the way cultures around the world connect and communicate. This era made it possible for people to stay linked across great distances, breaking down barriers that previously kept societies apart. During this time, Many people left their farms in search of new job opportunities in cities and industries, which led to significant improvements in working and living conditions for many. Now, if we look back further to the Industrial Revolution starting in the 1750s, we see how mechanization fundamentally changed production methods. This shift didn't just impact factories, it sparked broad economic and social changes that shaped modern society. Both these revolutions, the industrial and the information, are key drivers of our current interconnected world. They illustrate how technological advancements continuously reshape our economies, societies, and everyday lives, aligning with the larger theme of progress and transformation. Most countries have different levels of government, such as local, regional, and national. These governments are shaped by the country's unique history and culture, which influence how they operate. Governments play a crucial role in making and enforcing laws that help bring people together and maintain order. They also manage key aspects like territory, population, sovereignty, and the country's independence from outside control. All of these elements are essential for understanding how governments function and how they support the stability and identity of a nation. Let's take a closer look at the federal system. In this setup, power is divided between the states and the central government. Each level has sovereignty in certain areas, meaning they can make decisions independently within their own spheres. Countries like the United States, Canada, Brazil, Australia, and India operate under this system. It's a way to balance power and prevent any one level from becoming too dominant. Now, contrasting that with the unitary system. In this case, all the power is concentrated in a central government. The local or regional authorities have limited or no independent power. This system tends to work well in smaller countries or those that are less ethnically diverse. Examples include the United Kingdom and France, where the central government holds most of the authority and regional governments follow its directives. Understanding these systems helps us see how different nations organize their political power, which is crucial for understanding their governance, stability, and how they serve their citizens. It's all about finding the right balance of authority to best suit a country's unique needs. Let's take a closer look at constitutional monarchies. In this form of government, the monarch shares power with elected legislatures, meaning that while the king or queen may have a ceremonial role, real political power is exercised by elected officials. Moving on, there are different types of governments to consider. For example, totalitarian regimes are characterized by a single leader who controls all aspects of life, leaving no room for personal freedoms or opposition. On the other hand, monarchies, such as those led by a king or queen, have leadership that is inherited, and these rulers often hold supreme power over the government. Now, let's talk about autocracy, which is actually one of the oldest and most common forms of government. Autocratic systems achieve and maintain authority primarily through inheritance or the use of force, rather than through democratic processes. Broadly speaking, there are three major groups of government structures, but the key takeaway here is understanding how power is acquired and maintained, whether through shared power, inheritance, or force. Recognizing these distinctions helps us see how different governments operate and influence the lives of their people. Usually, those in power suppress all political opposition to maintain their control. They often control decisions made by elected legislatures, giving the illusion that they are truly representing the people's interests. The real power, however, typically stems from sources like wealth, military strength, social status, and sometimes religion. An important concept here is oligarchy, where a small, elite group holds the actual power. This concentration of power in the hands of a few can take many forms, but the key idea is that those with resources and influence dominate the political landscape. Understanding these types of government helps us see how power is often maintained behind the scenes, even when it appears that the people have a say. So, when we talk about a republic, what we're really saying is that all the major officials are elected by the people. The head of state, for example, is chosen for a specific term, which helps ensure accountability and regular leadership renewal. Moving on to representative democracy, This is a system where citizens don't directly make laws or run the government themselves. Instead, they elect representatives who do that work on their behalf. Think of it as a way to make governance more manageable and efficient. And then, at the core of all these ideas is democracy itself. Democracy is about leaders ruling with the consent of the citizens. It's the citizens who hold the ultimate power, whether through voting, participating in civic life, or other means. These concepts are interconnected, illustrating how different systems ensure that power ultimately resides with the people. Let's take a closer look at the concept of economic systems. When we talk about a command economy, the government makes most of the decisions about what to produce, how to produce it, and who gets the goods and services. It's a highly controlled system. In contrast, the market economy relies on the forces of supply and demand, with little government intervention, allowing individuals and businesses to make those decisions themselves. Now, traditional economies are based on customs and traditions that have been passed down through generations. These systems tend to be more stable, but also more resistant to change. So, when we examine the three types of economic systems, command, market, and traditional, we see they all aim to answer three fundamental questions. Who gets the goods and services produced? How should they be produced? And what and how many goods and services should be produced? These are the three basic decisions that every economic system has to address, and they shape how societies organize their economic activities. Understanding these questions helps us see how different systems approach economic challenges and allocate resources. Traditional economy is primarily based on habit and custom. In such systems, people's activities are defined by long-standing traditions. They're not free to make independent decisions. Instead, they do what has been done in the past. This means that their economic roles and production methods are passed down through generations. Because of this rigid structure, traditional economies are quite rare today, with only a few still in existence. This contrasts with more modern economic systems, where choices and innovation play a bigger role. Governments influence economies primarily through spending, and the United States is a good example of this. A mixed economy is where the government supports and regulates free enterprise, helping to keep competition both free and fair. In such an economy, people have the power to decide where to work, which drives the labor market. Now, let's talk about the market economy, also known as capitalism. In a market economy, decisions are made by individuals and private groups rather than the government. It's all based on free enterprise, meaning businesses produce what people want to buy. This system is fundamentally about the right to make a profit without government interference, which encourages innovation and efficiency. These different economic systems show how countries balance government involvement with individual choice to create a functioning economy. Understanding these systems helps us see how policies and personal decisions shape the economy as a whole. Let's take a moment to consider the belief that a command economy is good for society. In this system, the government owns the means of production, which includes land, labor, and capital. They also direct all economic activity, making decisions about what to produce, how to produce it, and who gets it. One key point here is that citizens often have little or no say in how government spends money or manages resources. This can lead to a centralized control that aims to promote equality and stability, but it also raises questions about individual freedom and choice. Understanding this helps us see how different economic systems operate and the trade-offs involved. In a command economy, the focus is on collective goals set by the government, which can be very different from market-driven systems where consumers and businesses influence economic decisions. This slide ties into our broader discussion about the various ways societies organize their economies, each with its own advantages and challenges. Now, let's look at renewable resources, which include hydroelectric power, solar energy, and nuclear energy. These sources are called renewable because they naturally replenish over time. However, they can be expensive to develop and maintain, and they may also have environmental consequences that we need to consider, like habitat disruption or pollution. On the other hand, we have non-renewable resources such as minerals and fossil fuels. These are finite, meaning they can run out if we don't use them wisely. That's why conservation is so important. Preserving these resources ensures they last longer and reduces environmental impact. To sum up, natural resources come in two main types: renewable and non-renewable. Both are vital for our society, but managing them responsibly is key to a sustainable future. This awareness connects directly to the broader theme of how resources, trade, and the environment are interconnected and impact each other. Let's take a closer look at the world economic activities, which are generally divided into four main types: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. These categories help us understand how countries develop their economies. Some nations focus heavily on their natural resources, meaning they develop their economies based on what they have in abundance, like minerals, oil, or agricultural products. This approach is often associated with the primary sector. However, the distribution of these natural resources isn't even across the globe. Some countries are rich in resources, while others have very little. This uneven distribution can have a significant impact on the global economy, influencing everything from trade patterns to economic stability. Understanding these different types of economic activities and resource distribution is crucial as we explore how countries grow and develop over time, and how these factors shape the interconnected world we live in. Now, let's take a closer look at the different types of economic activities. Starting with the quaternary activity, this involves processing, management, and distribution of information. Think of white-collar professionals working in offices, handling data, making decisions, and organizing information. It's a highly specialized sector that supports other parts of the economy. Moving on to tertiary activities, these are more about providing services. This includes professional services like consulting, as well as wholesale and retail activities, everything from selling goods to offering expertise. Next, we have secondary economic activities, which focus on adding value to raw materials through manufacturing. For example, turning raw steel into cars or fabric into clothing. Interestingly, these activities usually happen close to markets because that's where the products are needed and can be distributed efficiently. Lastly, primary economic activities involve taking natural resources directly from the environment, like farming, mining, fishing, or forestry. These activities occur near natural resources themselves, because that's where the resources are found. Understanding these distinctions helps us see how economies develop and diversify over time, moving from resource extraction to more complex service and management roles. This progression is key to understanding overall economic development and how different regions specialize based on their resources and capabilities. Now, let's talk about the high standard of living that developed countries enjoy. Thanks to advances in commercial farming, they don't need as many people working directly in agriculture to produce enough food. Instead, a smaller workforce can supply the necessary food, freeing up more people to work in other areas. In developed countries, you'll find that most people are employed in manufacturing and service industries. These sectors drive economic growth and support the higher living standards we associate with these nations. So, overall, economic development shifts the focus from basic survival needs to more complex industries, which in turn boosts quality of life and prosperity. Now, when we look at developing countries, it's important to understand that their development is often measured by basic needs and economic activity. Essentially, a country's development depends on how effectively it provides essential resources like food, education, and shelter to its people. These are fundamental for improving living standards. In addition, the level of economic production plays a crucial role. When a country can produce goods and services efficiently, it not only supports its population, but also fosters growth and stability. All of these factors together give us a clearer picture of how well a nation is progressing in development. It's about more than just GDP numbers. It's about ensuring that people's basic needs are met and that the economy is supporting a thriving society. This understanding ties into the broader theme of economic development, highlighting the importance of comprehensive growth that benefits everyone. When we look at many developing countries, you'll notice that their economies are often centered around agriculture. In fact, a lot of people are engaged in subsistence farming, which means they grow just enough to meet their family's needs. Because of this, many of these communities are still quite poor. The main regions where this is common are Africa, Asia, and Latin America. These areas face challenges in moving beyond basic farming to more diverse and industrialized economies. Understanding this helps us see how economic development is a crucial step for improving living standards and creating more opportunities for people in these regions. Let's look at some of the key characteristics of developing countries. First, resource distribution is often uneven, especially when it comes to arable land, which makes farming challenging in many areas. Most of the population tends to live in rural regions, although this isn't always the case. The physical geography, mountains, deserts, and other natural barriers also complicates development efforts. Because of these geographical factors, most people engage in agriculture, usually subsistence farming, which means they grow just enough to meet their own needs rather than for sale or profit. This often leads to poor diets and limited access to health care, resulting in high infant mortality rates and lower life expectancy. The education system in these regions is frequently inadequate. Children often have to work on farms instead of going to school, which results in low literacy rates. Additionally, low energy usage reflects a lack of infrastructure and manufacturing industries, which further hampers economic growth. Unemployment rates tend to be high, and per capita GDP remains low, indicating that the average income per person is quite limited. These combined factors highlight the challenges faced by developing countries as they work toward improving living standards and economic stability. Let's talk about some of the challenges these countries face. First, we see that military leaders often spend huge sums of money on defense, but this comes at the expense of other societal needs like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This kind of allocation can really hinder overall development. We also see that many countries are plagued by civil wars and social unrest, which create instability and make progress difficult. These internal conflicts often stem from political, ethnic, or economic divisions that haven't been properly addressed. Corruption in government is another major issue. When policies and political decisions mainly benefit a small minority, the broader population's needs are left unmet. This lack of fairness and transparency can stall development and breed further unrest. After World War II, many nations gained independence and initially adopted central planning or command economies. But over time, many of these countries are now shifting towards free enterprise systems, recognizing the benefits of market-driven growth. Historically, colonial powers shipped raw materials from these countries to their home countries, where they were turned into finished products. These nations became reliant on colonies for manufactured goods, which limited their ability to develop diverse, self-sufficient economies. Finally, the colonial legacy left many of these countries with economies heavily based on extracting raw materials. This focus on resource extraction often prevents the development of more complex industries and makes these economies vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices. All these factors together highlight how political and historical issues deeply influence economic development in these nations. Now, moving on to slide 64, let's talk about how militant groups form in response to various pressures. These groups often emerge to strike back against perceived injustices or threats, and their goal is to heighten their influence in promoting change. Sometimes these groups are labeled as terrorists because of their methods and objectives. It's important to understand that their formation is often rooted in complex political, social, and economic factors. Next, we see that wealth in the developed world can actually lead to resentment. This resentment can stem from disparities in wealth and opportunity, creating tensions that sometimes spill over into violence or support for radical groups. Connecting this to the overall theme, These dynamics show how economic and social inequalities can contribute to instability, prompting the rise of militant movements. It highlights the importance of addressing underlying issues if we want to promote lasting peace and stability worldwide. Let's explore how multinational companies expand their operations across the globe. Many of these companies are based in developed countries, but to stay competitive, they often set up assembly operations in smaller developing countries. This strategy helps them keep labor costs down while still being able to sell their products back to the developed markets. It's a way to balance cost efficiency with market access. Now, these multinational companies don't just operate in isolation. They play a significant role in stimulating international trade. By establishing production and distribution networks across different countries, they create interconnected global trade routes. This interconnectedness is also driven by the unequal distribution of resources worldwide. Some countries have abundant natural resources, while others have more developed infrastructure or skilled labor. These disparities lead to the development of complex global trade networks, where different regions specialize in what they do best and trade with each other. So, in essence, the global trade system is shaped by these strategic business decisions and resource disparities, which together foster a highly interconnected and dynamic international economy. Now, let's look at how regions are working together to remove restrictions, such as NAFTA and the European Union, which are both examples of countries teaming up to facilitate trade. Recently, there's been a clear movement toward free trade, meaning countries are working to minimize trade barriers so goods and services can flow more freely across borders. However, countries still set up certain restrictions on goods from other countries, like tariffs, quotas, and embargoes. These tools are used to protect local industries or respond to specific economic concerns. Ultimately, each country manages its trade policies to benefit itself, which can sometimes lead to tensions or competition. So, when we talk about barriers to trade, we're really referring to these restrictions, tariffs, quotas, embargoes, that can hinder the free flow of goods. Understanding this balance between cooperation and restriction is key to grasping how global trade functions today. As our populations grow and technology advances, there's an increasing demand for resources to support our daily lives. Unfortunately, this expansion often leads to environmental degradation. For example, when human communities spread into new areas, they can threaten natural ecosystems, sometimes causing processes like desertification, where fertile land turns into desert. Deforestation is another major issue, as forests are cleared to make way for agriculture, development, or resources. This not only destroys habitats, but also impacts climate regulation. Pollution of water, air, and land is also a direct consequence of our economic activities, releasing harmful substances into the environment. Overall, our human activities have significantly affected the environment, highlighting the importance of finding sustainable ways to grow and develop without causing irreparable harm to the world around us.